Redundancy is in fact one of 5 potentially fair reasons for dismissing a member of staff, but it's the only reason that relates to the business requirements of the employer. All the other reasons tend to relate to the personal circumstances of the employee. So that makes the definition a little more complicated. But in broad terms, there are 2 limbs to the definition. The first limb of the definition applies where you're going to close your business or relocate your business, and that's always pretty clear-cut. The second and more tricky limb of the definition is where your requirements for work diminish. That can involve new technology, it can involve a fall in demand, and one example might be if you have 5 employees doing a particular job and you find that there are too many of them, but you want to concentrate the work and reallocate the work to 3 slightly differently skilled employees. In that situation, you'll still have a redundancy situation, even though your business is still continuing. You'll just want to continue it with fewer staff. Now, by and large, there's very little debate about whether a redundancy situation arises or not. Mostly, it will be possible to agree that this is happening with your staff. There can be exceptions. For example, if an employer wants to avoid a redundancy situation because it's going to be very expensive. Now, that mostly only happens in large public sector organisations, but you may find that some members of staff have very generous entitlements on a redundancy, and you need to bear that in mind. But as I say, by and large, satisfying the legal definition, as long as you're aware of it, is not a problem. But there's one other very important thing to be aware of when you're planning a redundancy program, which is this, that redundancy protection only applies to employees with 2 years continuous service. Many employees on short-term contracts won't be protected by the redundancy legislation, so you're going to be faced with the decision of whether you want to shed people who aren't protected by the legislation first before moving on to implement redundancies in the full sense of the word. The other point to be aware of is that some people won't qualify as employees at all. The most common example is agency workers, and some casual workers, interns, volunteers, those kind of people won't be within the scope of the legislation at all.